Find all our courses at MeanThat.com. Another very significant theory within the organizational theory studies is called the transaction cost theory. And if we have some organization, we can decide to operate according to the transaction cost theory. So let's see what it means to say transaction costs and theory associated with that. And then we will take a look at some sources of transaction costs. So this theory states the goal of an organization is to minimize the costs, and now we are going to have two kinds of costs. So minimize the costs of exchanging resources in the environment. So this is the first one. And then the second one, and the costs of managing these inside the organization. So let's think about it. When we are exchanging resources in the environment, there are going to be some costs. So let's assume that this is our organization. So we have an organization over here. And now we have some trading partners. So let's say, let me just copy paste this. So we have our trading partner over here, and we are going to exchange some resource. So we are, let's say selling a product, and of course we receive some cash for that, or we receive some revenue. But what is going to be transaction cost when we are doing this exchange? It's going to be the negotiation, and then let's say transport or communication. So we have to transport the product, and these are the transaction costs. We would like to minimize them. And why we would like to minimize them? Because these costs are not creating the value. So these two kinds of costs that we have just talked about, they are not directly creating the value, not directly creating value. Because if you think of it, if we are going to spend with negotiation, let's say 1 month, we are not going to receive more revenue from it. So we would like to cut the negotiation time and cut the transport time as much as possible, so that we will minimize these unnecessary costs which occur sort of naturally. Then they can occur also inside the organization. So let's look inside the organization. So let's say that we have two people within our organization, and now they are going to again exchange some resource or manage some sort of a resource. Let's say the resource is going to be information. So one person is going to transform some information to another person. So information, and then is going to receive some feedback. We again would like to minimize the negotiation or the communication costs. So the most optimal for our organization would be if this person, let's say, writes down the information and sends it as an email. It will take just a few minutes and we are done. Then this person receives the email and will immediately provide the feedback. So all over, our costs are going to be only 5 minutes. But if these people will have to communicate personally, well, then this guy has to stand up from his office, go through the building, and then come to the other guy and find him in his office. And now the personal communication is going to take place. And altogether, maybe they will spend both 1 hour. So again, 1 hour with this exchange of the information and the feedback. Now think of it. If their salary is $20 per hour, it's going to cost us altogether 20 plus 20. So just the transaction cost of exchanging this information was $40, and we would like to minimize this cost. So either when exchanging resources in the environment or managing these inside the organization. So that's the basics about the transaction cost theory. Now let's take a look at some sources of transaction costs. So first we have two concepts. We have environmental uncertainty. And then we have bounded rationality. What does it mean to say environmental uncertainty? Well, when you imagine us, we are quite small. So let's say this is one person, and now in the environment around us, so this is the huge environment around us, there is a lot of information. Information are everywhere. They are coming to us. So we have information everywhere, everywhere. Also here and also here. Now, that is the uncertainty. We as individuals or even our organization are quite uncertain about the environment because we cannot understand it to a full extent. So let's say we would like to know all of the prices of our competitors, but it's not possible because we have 100 competitors and they are creating, each one of them is created 100 products, so we would have to follow the prices of 10,000 products. So we cannot be fully certain about the decisions we are making in the environment. And the reason for this environmental uncertainty, so we can think of it as a reason, is what we call a bounded rationality. And bounded rationality is quite simple. We have only a limited capacity to sort of understand or to acquire information. So our minds are very limited. We are simply unable to have and understand everything that is going on around us. But we'll get back to this concept in a later videos. Now let's think of a second source of transaction costs, and that is opportunism and small numbers. So let's focus here. So we have a small numbers, and I will just choose different colors. So small numbers, and here we are talking especially about small numbers of suppliers. Now imagine quite a simple situation. So let's say here we have one supplier, and here we have another supplier. Now these two are giving a supply to our organization. So here we are. So here is some organization. Now you can imagine that from our perspective, from the perspective of this organization, we have a small number of suppliers, right? We have only two suppliers. Now what can happen is that these two will decide to behave opportunistically. So these two will decide to behave opportunistically, and they will sort of group and make some sort of an agreement that they visit each other and say, hey my friend, let's exploit this opportunity that we are only two suppliers and this organization is fully dependent on us, and all of a sudden both of us will raise the prices by $2 per unit. So both of us will raise the price of $2 per unit. Now this organization has no other choice than to accept this raise in the prices. So these two suppliers behave opportunistically because they understood that this organization has only a small number of suppliers. Now let's think of a third, risk and specific assets. So we have risk and specific assets. Well, what those can be? Let's say that we have again, let's say two companies. We have a computer chip manufacturer. So we have computer chip manufacturer, and then we have let's say a PC maker, again a PC maker. And you can imagine that these two companies have some sort of a symbiotic relationship, and the chip manufacturer is bringing a supplies of chips for this PC maker. So here we have a supply. Now imagine that the PC maker is going to have a demand. So let's say that he would like to have a specific chip for his computers, a specific chip. Now the chip manufacturer, and he will come with this demand to a chip manufacturer and will say, hey, I would like to have this specific chip. Can you make it for me? And then the chip manufacturer will try to create it, and it will cost, let's say, $100 million. $100 million. And it becomes a very risky asset for this chip manufacturer, because you know what can happen? The chip manufacturer will invest $100 million into really making this chip, and then will be supporting this PC maker with this chip. But what can happen? A PC maker will all of a sudden say, well, I would like to have this chip, let's say $10 cheaper per unit, so $10 less. And what will happen? The chip manufacturer has no other choice than to accept this demand of having the price lower by $10, because the chip manufacturer has already invested $100 million, and he simply cannot afford to lose this sort of supply. So this is what we call risk and specific assets. Now, as you can imagine, all these three are thinly connected with the transaction costs, because we are simply going to negotiate more. So in all these three cases, when there is a high environmental uncertainty, we are going to sort of negotiate with our partners much more. Then again, when there is opportunism and small numbers of suppliers, then this organization will try to ensure that the opportunistic behavior will not happen. So they will have to make a better agreements which cost time and simply are understood as a transaction cost. Finally, when there are risk and specific assets, again, these two companies are going to negotiate a lot so that this situation does not happen. So that was the basics of transaction cost theory.